Several years ago, I was driving with a friend of mine through some area where they were growing grapes for winemaking. And I remember noticing that there were, at the end of each row of vines, there was a small rose bush. I remember finding that somewhat odd. And so when we got to the place where they made the wine, I asked one of the people who knew what the reason for the rose bushes were. And they told me that it was because rose bushes are more sensitive to changes in the soil than the grapevines are. And so they plant these rose bushes to let them know when something's wrong before it kills the grapes. And so they're able to make adjustments as they need. I think that there's something similar going on with the family and society. That problems in society cue problems in the family that maybe go unseen or unnoticed. They're a sort of manifestation of those problems in the family. We say that the family is the building block of society, and so if the building blocks are weak, then the entire structure is going to be weak. John Paul II mentioned this whenever he said that as goes the family, so goes the nation, so goes the whole world in which we live. And so I think of this today as we celebrate Holy Family Sunday, and I want to mention a few things that I think go into making a holy family. The first is that the first work of God was to bring order. And so bringing order is one of the qualities of a holy family. Right? God at the very beginning brought order out of chaos. He separated the light from the dark. He separated the land from the water. He separated day and night. And he set order also to the animals. He creates all of the animals, but then he sets man over them to govern them, to take care of them. And so God imposes his order in everything in creation, and he imposes his order even in the family. We have a commandment, the fourth commandment, that tells us that children are to honor their father and mother. Now, it's put this way, that children are to honor their father and mother, again, to impose that sort of structure, that order in the family, and it lets us know that parents are in charge. Right? Parents are in charge. Parents have a duty to govern their families well. Right? If you grow up in a family like mine, you know this. Right? I knew that my dad was in charge. Every once in a while, when I was feeling really brave and I thought he couldn't hear, I might mouth off a little bit to my mom, but if he heard, that was a disaster. My dad was in charge. My mom and dad were in charge, and I knew this. And so I grew up knowing, I didn't always do it, but I grew up knowing that I was supposed to honor my mother and father. And so if children are to honor their parents, the parents are to recognize and to assert their authority over their children. Right? It doesn't mean that you become dictators, but you do have authority and you are meant to teach and guide and even discipline your children. Right? This is your responsibility as a parent. This is your God-given task as one who has children. Right? The same is true for me. People call me father. And so I have a specific role in ordering this portion of the diocese that the bishop has entrusted to me. Right? If I just let everyone do what they want to do and kind of take over all kind of things, there's not a lot of order in the parish and things go wrong. Right? Again, I'm not called to be a dictator and sort of impose my will on everyone, but I do have that role as a father to impose certain order in this parish. Right? And now we know that if we do this as parents, that we are not always going to be popular. But being popular is not the point of being a parent. Right? It is to raise children. And I learned this, I wouldn't say the hard way, but I learned this firsthand A few months ago, I gave a homily about parents bringing their kids to Mass. And I was encouraging them to bring them. I think my point was, a lot of times parents will say, well, I don't get anything out of Mass because my kids are all over the place. And they get embarrassed when they make noise and all of this. So I was trying to encourage them to continue to bring them. And the next week, as I was standing out back, greeting people after Mass, a family walks out, and a mom is holding her little boy, and she said, Father, he is not happy with you. Right? He was so much trouble, we had started leaving him home. We would take turns going to Mass, but after your homily, we were bringing him. And he's mad that he has to come to church now. I said, well, that's fine. But I'm happy to report that a few months later, he's forgiven. Right? He even tells me hi when I see him. Sometimes he even has a smile on his face. Right? If we're trying to be popular, then we're not going to impose the order that we need to impose. We're not going to do our job as parents. Right? And so we are called to do that. Right? You as parents have to tell your children, get up, we're going to Mass. Right? I don't care what you want to do, we're going to go to Mass. I was visiting with an older gentleman who has grown children, and he was telling me about how one time his adult child came to visit, and he slept in, and so the dad went and woke him up and said, hey, we're going to Mass. He said, Dad, I'm not going to Mass. He said, well, you're at my house, and so we're going to Mass. We're either going to go, the hard way or the easy way. Either you're going to go, or I'm going to drag you. And you end up going with him, right? So you're going to tell him you're going to Mass. Or sometimes as a parent, you have to say, no, you're not going to do this. You're not going to go to that party. Right? You're not going to hang out with these people. Again, I remember my dad as a child telling me I couldn't go to certain people's houses, and I couldn't understand that. Right? These were my friends, but he knew that they were doing things that we shouldn't be doing. He also knew that I wasn't smart enough not to do them. Right? And so he said, stay away from those people. Right? They're going to get you in trouble. I didn't listen, and I ended up getting in trouble. It's amazing how much my dad knew. Right? So parents are not called to be popular. They're called to impose that order into their families. And if we do this, right, if we impose that order, then in the long run, maybe not in the short term, but in the long run, it will bring peace to the family. Now, the second quality of a good, holy family is that members of the family sacrifice for one another. Right, we see this in the Holy Family. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph sacrificing for one another. Joseph rising, not really knowing what's going on, right? Rising and taking the child and his mother to flee from Herod, who's trying to kill Jesus. Right? Joseph over and over again sacrificing of himself for the sake of Mary and Jesus. And the same is true of the others. Right? Mary sacrificing herself to raise Jesus. Sacrificing herself to tend to Joseph's needs. And Jesus obeying Mary and Joseph and sacrificing ultimately for them and for the entire world. Right? We see this in a good family. Parents sacrificing for their children. Willing to give up their time. Willing to give up their what they desire to do in order to do what the children need. Right? Again, over and over again, I remember my parents doing this for me. I have very vivid memories of being out at Sycamore Point for the 4th of July and my dad and mom taking me back into town for my all-star baseball game. This is when I used to be good at sports. That's out the window, but I used to be good. Right? And they would go through all of this effort, leave the family, leave the rest of the people having fun and come with me to my games. And then I remember one night having to go back late at night to the camp and my dad fixing a cup of coffee so he could stay awake to drive us back. Right? Sacrificing of themselves so that I could have this opportunity to play baseball. And then the third quality of a holy family that I want to mention today is the most important quality. Right, and it's a combination of the first two, that we have to have a proper order and we have to sacrifice, but it's in relation to God. right? We have to have that proper order and that spirit of sacrifice in relation to God. And the Ten Commandments even tell us this, right? So the Ten Commandments are divided up into two sections. The first three teach us how we are to deal in our relationship with God, and then the last seven teach us how to deal in our relationship with others. Right, so even in the structure of the Ten Commandments, we see that that order and that relationship with God is most important. That we have to have that right first, and only after we have that in place does it spill out and influence our relationship with other people. And so a holy family is one that loves and honors and obeys God, and then out of that, they love, honor, and obey one another. And so as we look around, I think we can see, and you do because you tell me, right, that the roses are dying, that the world is a bit crazy. A lot of people have expressed to me over the last several months, Father, I don't recognize our country anymore. Right? Things are going poorly. And so I think the point is that we can't start on that level, right? The world is crazy. How do I fix the world? Because if we think about it on those terms, we become very discouraged. Right? If I think about, well, the church in general needs so much help. Well, what can I do for the church? Big church. Well, not a whole lot. But what I can do is I can focus on this church, right? The church that the bishop has sent me to. And I can make sure that I do everything possible to help people to be holy here, right? That I impose order here, that I sacrifice for you here, that I make sure that I have a right relationship with God. And if I do that, I will help to make this flock holy. And if that happens, then we'll see that trickle and spill over into the church. Right? If you work on making your family holy by ordering it, by sacrificing, by teaching that relationship with God, then you're going to help not only make your family holy, but you're going to help in putting the nation back where we think it ought to be. Right? Helping it to be the nation that we do recognize. If you make your family holy, then we will see the world change. Right? And we know this because of what Pope John Paul II said. Right? That as goes the family, so goes the nation, and so goes the world in which we live.